In the year 1231, a German court registry records a case that captures something fundamental about medieval justice. A woman named Gertrude stood accused of adultery. The evidence consisted of one neighbor's testimony about a conversation. Within days, her life had been permanently altered by judicial punishment. This wasn't an anomaly. It was the system working exactly as designed. To understand medieval justice toward accused adulteresses, we must first abandon modern assumptions about evidence, trial, and punishment. Medieval Europe operated under a completely different legal and theological framework, one where a woman's body was never fully her own, and where public punishment served purposes far beyond individual correction. The legal status of married women in medieval Europe was defined by the concept of covertza. Upon marriage, a woman's legal identity became subsumed under her husband's authority. In the language of medieval jurists, she was femme covert, a covered woman. This wasn't merely symbolic. It meant she couldn't own property independently, couldn't enter contracts, and had limited legal standing in courts. Adultery, therefore, wasn't simply a moral transgression. It was legally classified as a property crime, theft of a man's exclusive rights to his wife's reproductive capacity. In an era without genetic testing or reliable birth records, a man's certainty about his legitimate heirs depended entirely on controlling his wife's sexuality. The stakes were enormous. Inheritance, family alliances, and political arrangements all hinged on legitimate bloodlines. This explains why legal codes across medieval Europe prescribed such severe penalties. The Anglo-Saxon laws of King Canute, dating to the early 11th century, specified nose and ear removal as standard punishment for convicted adulteresses. The 13th century legal compilation known as the Sachsenspiegel outlined similar provisions in Germanic territories. French customary law allowed for public shaming rituals. Spanish fueros detailed various forms of corporal punishment. But these laws didn't exist in isolation. They were embedded in a theological framework that viewed female sexuality as inherently dangerous and requiring strict control. Church doctrine, drawing on interpretations of Augustine and other church fathers, presented women as more susceptible to temptation, a legacy of Eve's role in the fall. This theological perspective provided moral justification for legal restrictions and harsh punishments. The judicial procedures themselves reveal much about medieval legal thinking. Unlike modern courts that require substantial evidence and presume innocence, medieval justice operated on different principles. Accusations from credible witnesses, usually meaning property-owning men, carried tremendous weight. A husband's suspicion alone could initiate proceedings. Once accused, women faced limited options for defense. Some regions employed trial by ordeal, a practice rooted in the belief that God would intervene to reveal guilt or innocence. The most common form for accused women was trial by cold water. The accused would be bound and immersed in blessed water. The theological reasoning held that pure water, sanctified for baptism, would reject a guilty person, causing them to float, while accepting an innocent person, who would sink. The Fourth Lateran Council banned clerical participation in trials by ordeal in 1215, not due to concerns about cruelty, but because church authorities deemed it inappropriate to compel divine intervention. However, the practice continued in various forms for decades afterward, particularly in regions with weak central authority. When trial by ordeal fell out of favor, courts relied more heavily on witness testimony and confession, but the standards of evidence remained low by modern measures. Circumstantial evidence, being seen speaking privately with a man, receiving a gift, even appearing to friendly, could support a conviction, especially if the husband desired one. The punishments themselves served multiple purposes. Medieval justice emphasized public spectacle. Punishments occurred in town squares, at market crosses, along main street sawways where maximum visibility was guaranteed. This wasn't accidental. The public nature of punishment served several functions simultaneously. First, it demonstrated the authority of law and the consequences of transgression. Second, it reinforced social hierarchies and gender norms. Third, it created what historians call social discipline, using the punishment of individuals to regulate the behavior of entire communities. The specific forms of punishment varied by region, social class, and local custom. Common penalties included public shaming processions, where the accused would be paraded through streets, often with head shaved and wearing distinctive clothing. Physical mutilation, the removal of ears or nose, served as permanent markers of transgression. Imprisonment in convents or fortress cells removed women from society entirely. Crucially, the severity of punishment often correlated inversely with social status. Noble women typically faced imprisonment or convent enclosure rather than physical mutilation. This reflected medieval thinking about the body politic. Noble bodies required different treatment than common bodies, yet even privileged women faced devastation, permanent separation from children, loss of status, and decades of isolation.